Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. My name is Karen Bowen. I'm the Democratic Services Officer supporting the meeting this evening. The meeting is a remote meeting. We're in the chamber purely to manage the system and equipment within the chamber, but everyone else will be attending remotely. Could I please, first of all, may I remind everyone present, this meeting is being live streamed, as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Should a participant wish to speak, would you please use the, if you look on your screen, there's a clap hand function. If you could use that, please, and then the chair will call you in when ready to speak. Please be patient because there is a slight time lag, but you will not need to press the button until the chair asks you to do so. When you're invited to address the committee, could you please ensure that your microphone and camera is switched on? If there is any issues, or if there are any issues during the meeting, would you please let myself know as Democratic Services Officer through the chat function? And once you have participated, would you please remember to turn your activation button off? I have had apology from the chair of this committee, Councillor Rhiannon Birch, but Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby, the Vice Chair, will be taking the meeting. We're just double checking to make sure that we have the necessary quorum, and we will commence with the Vice Chair as soon as possible. Thank you. One, two, three. Yes. Chair, we do have a quorum. Thank you very much. If you would like to continue, thank you.
Thank you for confirming, Karen. So for those who don't know me, as Karen said, I'm Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby. I'm Vice Chair of the committee, and I'm pleased to be chairing the discussion that we're going to be having this evening. So we start with agenda item 1. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, I do have apologies for absence. Obviously from the Chairman, Councillor Rhiannon Birch, unable to be with us tonight, Councillors G. Bruce, Councillors Catherine Iannucci, and I also have an apology from Hayley Smith from Bernardo's. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 16th of October 2023. Are committee members happy with those minutes? If so, I will move them and just ask if somebody would second them. So I see no dissent in terms of issues with the minutes. Would one of the committee members second the minutes, please? Thank you very much, Councillor. Moving on to agenda item 3, any declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Are there any declarations of interest, please? So I would like to declare an interest in relation to agenda item 7, the Strengthening Our Communities report. I'm a trustee of Coastlands, which is the charity that runs the Vale Food Bank. I have a personal, not a prejudicial interest and dispensation to speak and vote on matters relating to Coastlands and the food bank, so I will stay in the meeting. If there are no other declarations of interest, we move on to agenda item 4, which is a presentation on social services and the third sector. And I believe Ian Macmillan is here to take us through that presentation. So over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Karen, how's that looking. It's the first time I've had to share a presentation within this new. There we go. It's just taking a bit of time.
Yes, it's just taking a little bit of time. Thank you. Hi, Ian. Would you like us to share it from this end?
Yeah, if you could. Sorry, Karen.
That's okay. Don't worry. Thank you.
Just to confirm that we can see it online. Now it's gone.
Sorry, Karen. If you could share, that'd be very kind, and I'll. Just while Karen's getting the presentation, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Ian McMillan. I'm the head of resource management and safeguarding within the Social Services Directorate.
Ian, would you try trying again? Sorry, because I did hear the chair say that she could see it online.
Okay, just bear with me because I'm just.
We can see it. We can see it online. Oh no. So I've got something that says social services in the third sector presentation waiting for sharing source.
Yeah.
I think we're still waiting.
Sorry, Karen. I think I'll just make a start, and then if I can, if we're still having trouble sharing it, I can share the presentation with members of the group after this meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. We'll continue trying to get it on for you as soon as possible. Thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, and apologies to everyone in the meeting for that. Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you about social services and our links with the third sector. I'm going to focus very much on the services that we commission, those we refer to, and those we talk to. And then lastly, I'm going to be talking to you about our Section 16 forum that is going to be launched in March of this year. In order to prepare for this presentation, I've talked to operational managers from across all of our services within our directorate, so from across children and people services, adult services, and also resource management and safeguarding. Thank you, Karen. If we can just go on to slide 2, please. So I'm just going to initially start off with those services that sit within resource management and safeguarding. So within my services, we're responsibility for commissioning. So we commission and we tender exercises for adult services and for children's services. But we've also got services that lie within my team, and a really key area of information for us in terms of signposting others to third sector organisations is in relation to our family information service and in relation to DARIS. And we work really closely with organisations across the Vale to ensure that their information is put on social media via our index letter and on DARIS Cymru. So there's a wide variety of services that continue to be updated month on month on that service. And we also attend events to provide information to parents, carers, and those who support families, and invite third sector organisations to attend those events. Our unpaid carers team sits within resource management and safeguarding. We work really closely with the third sector in relation to unpaid carers. I apologise for my pronunciation of Welsh here, but Adfeiriad. They provide a really brilliant service for unpaid and informal carers who are experiencing and recovering from serious mental health illnesses. They provide carers referred to them with one-to-one information, advice, support. That can be emotional and practical support, and that's often identified via a carer's assessment. We got Cardiff and the Vales Parents Federation, and they provide one-to-one information, advice, advocacy, emotional and practical support. They also offer training and provide social support to unpaid carers via informal meetings, information activities, and they provide that at lots of sites across the Vale of Glamorgan that you may be aware of. Cardiff YMCA are a really crucial organisation for us. They work with our young carers. Our young carers project is known as Time for Me, and it provides opportunities for young carers to participate in social activities, events and short breaks outside the school and the home environment. And they've also been supported in terms of the implementation of a regional carers, young carers ID scheme. There's also Care and Repair Cardiff, and they actually provide a home energy check, and that starts to assist unpaid carers in relation to that energy and that support in that area. Care Collective are a really crucial organisation in terms of providing support for carers in an emergency. They provide one-off respite care in terms of emergency situations for carers, and that includes people with dementia and those suffering with mental health conditions. And finally, just in terms of carers in relation to THAPUS, or now known as the Alzheimer's Society, and they provide respite for unpaid carers, but they also do lots of work in terms of being able to provide kickstart and road test new services for carers. So, and some of those have gone on to be self-sustaining. For example, things like lunch clubs and supporting innovations like choirs and outings into the community. So I'm just going to go on to children and young person services. I can see we haven't got the slides, but I'm sure we could share them after this meeting. So Action for Children are our biggest contract. We call it our super contract. Its contract was recommissioned in 2023. Action for Children provide a wide suite of services in relation to children and young people services, but they really focus on supporting families to stay together. So working on families, providing support, supporting families at times of crisis. We've got an excellent working relationship with Action for Children. We also provide support in terms of bespoke residential arrangements for a young person, and they've also got the respite service at T Robin, which makes a huge difference to families. We also work really closely with Llamai. We work with Llamai in relation to, we're setting up a residential provision with them at the moment, and that's going to be for older adolescents. But they also provide a mediation homeless service, a really crucial service, and supported lodgings and emergency beds within the community for those who have become homeless. Our Reflect service works with families who have sadly had their children removed and are no longer in their care. They support parents after care proceedings to try and enable and address some of those issues that have caused their children to be removed. We also work with Your Family Matters, and on a similar vein, they work with families to support and put together plans, family group conferences to help them overcome some of the challenges that are in their life. Our advocacy provider for children is NIAS. They not only are our advocacy provider for children, they're also currently piloting an advocacy service to work with parents who need advocacy when children and young people services are working with them. So I think you'll see there's a really strong list of established third sector providers, some of the bigger third sector providers to provide some of our bigger contracts within children and young people service. However, we work with a range of organisations, and particularly in terms of the early intervention and prevention agenda. The slide that was at slide 4 really set out the length and breadth of those services that we're involved with. And they work with services, they work with families from the earliest point of need to needing a statutory provision. So we have our Families First advice line. Our Families First advice line will signpost parents onto a variety of sources. So they could include Team Around the Family, our parenting service, our youth wellbeing service, to some of our youth justice services and some of the carer services that I've already referred to. So just in terms of some of the third sector organisations that they will also signpost to. So you've got Action for Children, so they got their Emojis Youth Group. You have the Autism Support Services known as Signet, which is delivered by Bernardo's. You've got community-based play therapy, And there's a range of services that the NSPCC support with, such as Pregnancy in Mind, and they provide some domestic abuse support services as well. Families First have a number of what we would call quite small commission contracts. They all actually can make a significant difference. A lot of those are grant funded, and year on year there can be challenges in terms of ensuring that grant money is available for future years, and this year being no exception in terms of some of those risks. You've got Vale's People's First. That's a really good programme in terms of supporting teams. It was really well received, and I know they delivered some schemes over the summer which were really successful. We've had some excellent feedback in relation to that. A really important service is delivered by Bernardo's, and that's in relation to supporting autism. So that's our child autism support service. They can actually support parents while their children are on the pathway to diagnosis, and that's really important because we know how long diagnosis can take. But also when parents have a child has a diagnosis, the Signet programme can provide support for parents whose children are on diagnosed being on the autistic spectrum. We've got DASH, that's our Vale Domestic Abuse Service, and they provide lots of support and lots of trauma-informed support to people who have suffered abuse. There's also the Action for Children mentoring programme, which provides support for people and mentors and can really help people develop and focus on skilling them up and focus on some of those specialism, providing mentor and support in terms of that training and experience. Also had some lovely feedback in terms of Amelia Trust Farm, a really small letter of understanding with them as an organisation, but they've made a real difference, for example, in terms of holiday activities and inclusion projects. Going on to slide 5 now, that's in relation to our youth justice services. They refer to a huge range of third sector organisations. They don't tend to directly commission. On the slide, I've highlighted some of the key third sector organisations that they refer to. But just to give you a sense of it, very heavily focused in terms of victim support, so supporting the victims of families, but also referring young people onto some really positive organisations. You've got Empire Sporting Chance, that's in relation to sport and fitness. They do the same. They refer to Cardiff City Foundation. They do lots of work around football, but also life skills. But there's other agencies such as supporting and refer to areas like sexual health, emotional well-being, support in terms of employment, in terms of accommodation, food banks. So there's a range of areas that youth justice utilise within the community. Moving on to the next slide now, please, Karen. And this is in relation to adult services. And the first slide is very much in relation to learning disability and mental health. Vale Plus is an organisation that many of you will be familiar with. It's an educational provision for people with learning disabilities. And it's based across two sites within the Vale. They're our biggest contract outside of supported accommodation, and we get really positive feedback from the people who attend it. And the groups are very embedded within the community. You have Innovate Trust and Cartrefi Cymru. They've been contracted as support providers for following supported accommodation retender in 2021. And again, we have really positive feedback in terms of them as a provider. We then have Vale People First. So they're a self-advocacy organisation, and they're contracted to provide a citizen panel. I know they did a huge amount of work in terms of supporting a retender we had recently. They're also used to interview. If anybody wants to join our learning disabilities team, they're part of the panel, and they make a real difference. They also run, for example, community groups, men's groups. They do one-to-one sessions. They represent citizens' voice at local and national forums. So lots of really positive work they undertake. You've got the Friendly Trust. They're commissioned to provide budgeted and financial advice for people with a learning disability. And we have advocacy matters in place to provide advocacy support. Going on to mental health then, so we've got Mind in the Vale. They provide provision from 2 sites in the Vale. So you've got one in the Western Vale and one in Barry, and they provide social opportunities, signposting, peer group support, some really focused support via recovery style program. They also attend our weekly MDT. So lots of preventative work, lots of educational work, lots of support services, and they really complement our primary mental health team. You've got platforms, they provide support specifically in relation to housing advice and support for people with mental health problems. And I know their weekly drop-in service makes a real difference, not only for people who need the service, but also for staff in terms of taking advice. And then lastly, we've got Cardiff and Vale Action for Mental Health, and they provide support for working adults and for those older adults who also need support in relation to their mental health. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Karen? So this slide illustrates the range of services that our intake and assessment team within adult services, but also some of our long-term care management team in adult services tend to refer to. There's services that I haven't got on this slide. This is just an illustration of the range of services that they refer to. So you've got Age Connect Cymru, so that's in relation to advocacy provision. I've also highlighted there some of the lunch clubs we got in place. So sometimes we put some seed money in to provide support. So for example, with the lunch clubs, that's in relation to the rent of the premises. Similarly, with the Dinas Powers Voluntary Concern, we support in terms of the contribution of rent and some salary, a resource centre. You have Diverse Cymru. So Diverse Cymru, that's in relation to direct payments, and direct payments sit with RMS. But Diverse Cymru provides. Sorry, that's Darius. I should have said for that. Provides support for people in provision who are in receipt of provision of direct payments, so they can support in terms of recruitment, payroll services, managed account. Sorry, Diverse Cymru is in relation to providing support for people with a physical disability. Penarth and District Live at Home, so we provide some funding towards lunch clubs held in Penarth, and the befriending service that's in place for older people. You've got Havard Care, and many of you will be familiar with Havard Care. That's a daycare provision for older people in the Western Vale. Care Quality Limited, so that's in relation to the domiciliary services that are provided to residents in the extra care facility in Barry. And lastly, I was just going to mention Sight Cymru, because they do some excellent work in providing support to people with sight or with a hearing impairment. Let's go on to the next slide, please, Karen. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to talk to you about the section 16.4, and I'm not sure whether you'll all be aware of this. So I'm the SRO for the implementing the section 16.4 within the Vale. For those of you that are unaware, under Part 2 of Section 16 of the 2014 Social Services and Wellbeing Act, we've got a duty as a local authority to promote social enterprises, cooperative, user-led services, and the third sector. And guidance on fulfilling that duty was set out under Part 2 of the Code of Practice. And there's a requirement on this, and it's actually set out as a regional requirement to set up these forums. So that is moving away from that being a social value forum that you will have heard discussed before. And the focus of these forums is to really support and encourage social enterprises, cooperative, user-led services in the third sector. And so they're able to take and fulfil service delivery opportunities that we identify as commissioners. So the idea is really about bringing providers together into a dedicated space where we can provide mutual support, some shared learning, the promotion of good practice. And it's really hope that these forums are going to improve dialogue between Section 16 organisations and commissioning providers like ourselves. And it will give us an opportunity really to discuss some of the challenges, risks and opportunities that are out there within the region. So we had discussions at the Regional Commissioning Board in relation to this. And it was agreed that the Cardiff Council and the Vale of Glamorgan would have separate forums. I think it was recognised that we had our own distinct challenges as local authorities in terms of commissioning. But it was agreed that we might come together at specific times in terms of specific issues. I carried out a presentation to GVS and some of its members in December with Donna Coyle from Compass, who's supporting in terms of your Wales implementation of this agenda. And we sent out a survey to many of those who attended and beyond, which closed only a week ago. And I'm now going to do some work within the next couple of weeks to really evaluate some of the feedback we've had. But the plan is to have our first Section 16 forum in March. If we could just go on to the final slide, please, Karen. So it's just wanted to summarise really. I think that the presentation sets out really the breadth of services that we have and those working relationships that we have in place with the third sector. I think you can see that it's really clear that without the support of the third sector, we wouldn't be able to ensure that all of those people who have got eligible needs for care and support, all of those who require early intervention and prevention, but all of those who also need long-term care because of a particular need would have the support that they require. So there's some really strong established relationships between social services and the third sector. However, despite these strong relationships being in place, I think there's a lot we can build on. I see the Section 16 forum as being a really key focus point for us, beginning to be more transformational in terms of how we can ensure closer links with the sector. I think we're going to have to, the key is being about how we can transform in terms of care. We're going to have to do it in a really cost-effective way. We're in a really challenging financial climate. I need to be really transparent. There are risks to services at the moment because of the current financial climate. So we need to really focus on how we can continue to support those services that are at risk. The key really will be, following the Welsh Government agenda, will be about rebalancing the market and trying to bring greater diversity of providers to the market. So thanks very much for listening to my presentation. I'm now happy to take any questions or feedback.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Ian, for providing such a comprehensive report. There's clearly a huge amount of activity that's taking place in terms of the relationship between social services and the third sector. And I've got a few questions, but if I may, I'll jump in with one straight away and then bring in anyone else who wants to ask anything or comment. So I think in right at the very end of your presentation, you referenced the fact that there are risks to some services in the current economic climate. And while you were talking, I was thinking about the increased demand that social services has been seeing, both in children's services and in particularly services for older people. And I'm guessing that kind of increased demand is also reflected across the third sector organisations that we work with. So just interested in your perspective on where the pressure points are, and whether or not you have a sense of the resilience across the third sector. And I'm sure colleagues from the third sector who are joining us tonight, will also have a perspective on that. But interested in any thoughts you might have on that, Ian.
Yeah, I presented a report to a scrutiny committee, and not this one, a couple of months ago, just in terms of, we did a piece of work in relation to our annual delivery plan in respect of the market stability report. So we really focused on what the current pressures were for us as a social services directorate, and the reality was that it was multifaceted, and it was demonstrating there will be very, very significant challenges, both from a children and young people services, but also from an adult services perspective. So if I start with children's, the focus is very much on continuing to see an increased need within society, and that being reflected in terms of the complexity, but also the number of referrals and the need for families to be supported and assessed. That has led latterly to an increase in names being on the Child Protection Register, but also sadly an increase in the number of children and people who are looked after by the local authority. So seeing pressure across the services in terms of children. So seeing a huge need out there in society in terms of, one, that parental need, and then that impact, but then that has on potentially their ability to care for their children. But if those children do become accommodated, then of course the need for those children to have the right type of care and support for us as their corporate parent. So lots of complexities in terms of children and people service. When we looked at adult services, it was across the board really, Councillor Selby. If you were looking through an increase in adults in terms of concerns in relation to their own mental health and well-being. But also, as you will have heard this before, an increase in people living longer, living with more complex needs, receiving a need for more care and support at home, which we're able to deliver in the Vale. But of course, lastly, a need for potentially an element of our population to need support to go into residential care or nursing care home environment, and for that increase in. So they were the key priorities, but there were many others that we looked at as well. It's probably better for maybe Rachel to comment on the third sector.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And I can see, Rachel, you want to come in on this, so please go ahead.
No. Right. Thank you very much, Chair. And indeed, thank you, Ian. That's a very comprehensive presentation on how you've been working with the third sector. And there are massive challenges, aren't there, for all of us as we move forward throughout the next 12 or indeed the next few years. I don't know whether anybody's aware, but the Welsh Government have a third sector partnership council with representatives from many organisations representing the whole of the sector that meets on a regular basis. And the most recent meeting, which has just taken place, was quite alarming to hear statistics reported to the committee along the lines of a survey that has been undertaken show 60% of third sector community and voluntary organisations are dealing with new types of need for their service users and indeed for their services. And 45% are operating services previously provided by the public sector. So many challenges for social services, but equally there are very great challenges for the third sector. And I welcome the introduction and the development of the Section 16 Forum. And I'm hoping that we here in the Vale of Glamorgan will be able to use that to make sure that we are genuinely working in partnership with the local authority and the third sector so that we can ensure that we lose no services here in the Vale. And in fact, that we look to develop more coming from the third sector that are obviously properly resourced to enable them to meet the ever-growing need of our population. I think Councillor Lloyd Selby has already mentioned food banks, and the impact on them and food pantries is enormous, and the numbers using and accessing those services is growing on a weekly basis. It's quite terrifying to see how steep that user curve is accelerating. That's for starters. There are plenty of other things I'm sure I could raise with you, Ian, but I just really would like to get your feedback on how you plan to ensure that we are working in partnership and making sure that none of our third sector partners are inappropriately resourced for what we're asking them to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And Ian, perhaps if I can just add to that so you can take both issues at the same time. I'm interested to find out more about the Section 16 Forum. How many organisations or individuals will join the forum, and what the makeup will be in terms of the partnership arrangements between the council and the third sector. So if you'd like to take all of those issues, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm genuinely excited about the opportunities that a Section 16 forum could provide for us. I see it as being very much a conduit in terms of that relationship between ourselves and third sector organisations. However, I would say there are already really established strong relationships in place which will continue to sit outside that. For example, relationships with children and people services and adult services, but also our commissioning and our procurement teams that we won't want to lose. In terms of how the forum's going to look, as I say, the survey closed in January. We haven't had as many responses as we would like, but what I have said, and when I met with GVS groups in December, is I see it very much being co-produced. Although the local authority are required to take a lead, I want to do that hand in hand with the third sector. I'm certainly hoping to have a co-chair, and I did ask in the survey whether there be any volunteers. So I need to look at the results in terms of that. In terms of the proposal that we put forward, and I'm really conscious to say that it's a proposal, because if other organisations and individuals disagree with the approach, then we need to rethink that. It will very much be on having a board, I guess, that oversees the Section 16 forum with members representing the commission providers, but also a variety of third sector organisations, those who wish to attend. And again, there's a question in the survey asking those who responded whether they'd be willing to be part of that board. But also the proposal is that we will have specific workshops which focus on areas that the third, which the third sector represent, and we'll have workshops that take place over the year that will really focus and get into the detail in terms of that. I would envisage it being an area where we as a local authority would talk about our future commissioning priorities and be able to set those, but also an opportunity for the third sector to come together and talk to each other and potentially work with each other, but also bring ideas. And talk to us about, in the same way that Rachel's talked about need increasing in society. I'd be expecting those discussions to be able to happen within that forum, and us to be able to have really open and frank discussions, and also to just share really good practice and celebrate some of our achievements together.
Thank you, Ian. I hope that addresses your query and your comments, Rachel. And I think it would be really good to get an update at some point, perhaps towards the end of the year, on how that new forum is actually functioning. Any questions or comments from anyone else? No, I don't see any hands. So Ian, thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you for your time. It would be great if you could forward the presentation to us, because I think we caught most of the slides, but there were probably some in the beginning that we missed. So it would be really good if committee could have a copy of those slides so that we can give them any further consideration. But thank you for your time. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you want to, but equally, if you want to leave and get on with the rest of your evening, please feel free to do that.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. So we move on then to agenda item 5, which is report of the voluntary sector, Glamorgan Voluntary Services, GVS Annual Report 2022 to 23. And I believe, Rachel, you're going to be taking us through this. So I'll just hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Members of the committee will be aware that GVS receives funding from the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and that we report back to the Joint Liaison Committee as one of the terms of the deed of grant from the Vale of Glamorgan Council. So in October 23, our annual general meeting was held and very well attended by members and indeed officers from the local authority, which I think Tom can attest to. We report back on all of the work that we have been involved in throughout the 22-23 financial year. And I guess when we look at this, it is really, when we review our work, it really helps us to ensure that we are actually focusing on our objectives and that we are undertaking work that is appropriate for our role as a county voluntary council. So the report has been circulated, and you will see from the report that there are many achievements that we are proud to report back on. Most organisations these days have moved services, etc., and digitised them. The rapid change from face-to-face to those online, as we're experiencing this evening, was obviously necessitated by COVID. But I think the majority of organisations have carried on with using some of that within the delivery of their work, and GVS certainly has. So we make a great deal of use of our website and our digital platforms. So we work in conjunction with Wales Council for Voluntary Action and all our sister county voluntary councils across Wales in an organisation called Third Sector Support Wales, TSSW. And together we have a customer relationship management system, a Wales-wide volunteer management system, and a Wales-wide funding search facility called Funding Wales. So it's really interesting to see the figures, etc., that come out from that. And in addition, we're also making sure that all of our information services are online, including our Vista, which is a quarterly magazine, which is published in-house. It says quarterly magazine. It's actually produced 3 times a year. And it's distributed to 1,000 groups and individuals, and that includes all councillors within the Vale of Glamorgan Council. We also make sure that we have newsletters on health, social care and wellbeing, and also sustainable funding. And over the past year, 8 updates were produced of the sustainable funding news. Our comprehensive range of information sheets are available online, and they are actually accessed on an astonishing level by members and the wider sector. Just really to report, I guess, at this point, while I'm talking about our members, at the annual general meeting in October, it was agreed by those present to the recommendation made by the Board of Trustees of GVS that we would no longer be charging for membership. So we did have a scale of membership charges, and we have removed those, and all membership is now free, as a recognition of challenges that third sector are facing around cost of living. So you'll see that we undertake a variety of practical services, and the sort of member groups that we have in our membership are small and locally based. While we do have national organisations and regional organisations, the majority are small, locally based organisations. And it is those organisations that access the practical services that we offer. It's a design and print service, so we're taking on the design of people's newsletters, pop-up banners, various PR material, leaflets, etc., and various other documentation that third sector organisations require. We run a variety of networks and fora, and it was one of those that Ian actually addressed. That was our health and social care network. when he was talking about addressing one of GVS's networks about the Section 16 forum. Funding services, well, it's absolutely vital, and it always has been, but even more so at the moment, for us to be able to support our local organisations with advice and information on where they can access funding. And we can report back that throughout 22-23, £650,000 worth of funding was obtained by local groups as a result, a direct result of advice and information given by GVS. It probably is much higher than that, but an awful lot of groups don't let us know that, and we only hear much later in the day that money has come their way after they've worked with members of staff within GVS. So we try to make sure that our local groups are as well informed as possible. And so we hold, well, we're calling them funding events, but I guess they're surgeries really, where we have representatives from particular funders giving valuable advice on a one-to-one basis with third sector organisations. It's a bookable service, so when we know that we've got Awards for All or Moondance or whoever the funder might be coming to give time, then we let our members know and they can book a session with those funders to see whether the application that they're putting together is working. So lots of different ways of helping people access funding. And part of this is actually training as well, making sure that people understand their role as a trustee, that they're involved in an appropriate manner, and ensuring really that they have access to the right information at the right time. Moving on. So the training that was offered, what we're trying to do these days is to offer it as much as possible online. And we had 126 delegates attending training courses with that 100% rating of either good or excellent for the training. But we also provide one-to-one training courses, particularly in IT and social media, where individuals do need that actual practical hands-on training. And that's always been assessed as being good or excellent by attendees. One of our largest areas of work is that of partnership. And you'll see from the list that we're involved in a very large number of partnerships and joint working initiatives with our partners in the local authority, but also with our partners in health and through the Public Service Board with partners across the board in all statutory services. So it does take up a tremendous amount of our time representing third sector on those joint working initiatives and boards, but it is vitally important that third sector has a voice at the table. I mentioned earlier the Health and Social Care Network. This is a vital information and sharing opportunity for those organisations that are working within the health and social care remit. And a variety of activities have taken place over the past 12 months. We obtained some funding from the Regional Partnership Board rather than BARD, which I can see in the report there. And 3 films were produced for 3 organisations, so Moss Rose Cottage, Women Connect First and Motion Control Dance. And we were able to help them access the right sort of filmmaker to enable them to put together short videos that explains the impact that they've been having on lives of people across the region and in particular in the Vale of Glamorgan. There have been a variety of other funds that we've been asked to manage during that 12-month period. So it was the Regional Integration Fund RIF supporting older people in the Vale, Cardiff and Vale University Board Health Charity, the RIF Third Sector Capital Investment Fund, Loneliness and Social Isolation Fund, Winter Pressures Grant, which was support for community centres to become more energy efficient. And just very briefly on that note, we're actually ourselves involved in a major development at one of our buildings in Llantwit Major. So the community centre CF61 that GVS runs, in conjunction with our partners in the local authority, have been successful in gaining funding from Ystadau Cymru to completely overhaul the heating system and all things carbon zero, or working towards carbon zero. So solar panels, extra insulation, changing of electric lights, and changing of the central heating system. So massive development there, which is vitally important, I think, for there to be that sort of investment in third sector buildings, so that they are able to fulfil and meet the needs of their local communities long term. It's about making them as sustainable as possible. Volunteering, it's a massive area for us. We've just held our annual large or big volunteering fair in Barry Memorial Hall last week, which was very well attended. We had 50 odd organisations with stalls present there, and around about 100 people attending to access that information. And what we found this year was that the people attending, members of the public attending, have been very keen to commit to volunteering. And I don't know whether folk have been hearing that it's been becoming more and more challenging to find volunteers over the last couple of years. We had that massive surge during the COVID and lockdown period, but a lot of volunteers were then lost. And so trying to make up those numbers again has been a really big challenge for organisations. And we try through our volunteering service to make sure that we're supporting our local organisations in gaining as many volunteers, and the right sort of volunteers. I mean, people who are committed, who've got skills, and are keen to learn. And this can be seen through the statistics that we have included within the report for volunteering that's before you. So we also ran a youth-led grant that is Welsh Government funded, and we were pleased to present grants to 4 successful youth projects. Our food share project delivers many opportunities for people to access free or discounted food, but also means that volunteers can be involved in that in a variety of different ways. And in the last month, we have extended that food share offer in conjunction with our partners in the local authority and public health to provide a smaller, similar offering in St Athan in the Gathering Place. Our gardening project involves a lot of, it's actually 30 plus volunteers now who are working on the gardens and grounds of the community centre and Illtyd House in Llantwit Major. So a tremendous level of support from the local community in the form of volunteering for the community centre there. We're managing 3 buildings at the moment. So we're managing CF61, which we bought a lease from the local authority for 99 years. And lots and lots of different activities take place within that building. But obviously the work that's being undertaken is going to impact that for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we're very cognizant of the fact that there is an impact on those users, and have tried our best to accommodate as many of them as possible within Illtyd House. But space is short, and some are having to look elsewhere. We hope they'll come back to us, but would fully understand if they don't. But the building they would be coming back to would be better controlled heating wise, so not cold or too hot, and certainly would be more sustainable for the future. Ishted House is the second building on the Llantwit Major site, and we have a variety of tenants, including Age Connects, Cardiff and Vale. And then there are various users of the community room within that building. So attached to Ishted House is the nursery, and that is now fully operational and providing a much needed nursery for local population. Then in St Paul's, on behalf of Newydd Housing, we are managing the St Paul's Community Centre in Arcot Street. It's a brand new community centre, purpose-built, and that is generating lots of interest with lots of different activities taking place there. We also have our presence in Barry in the Enterprise Centre, and we've been there since the year dot, since 1996, and find that that's extraordinarily useful for being able to deliver our services to our members and the wider public in Barry. So our environmental impact, you can read about that, and our efficiency savings. There are various projects, a couple I've touched on already. An important one that works very closely with social services in the Vale of Glamorgan Council is our community liaison officer. And the officer takes referrals from health and social care staff, particularly from Contact One Vale, with a focus on families, carers, young adults and people with long-term conditions who are under the age of 60. So sometimes those referrals are really complex, and they are likely to require a range of support from various third sector organisations. And this is really well managed by the community liaison officer. So we were still involved with Dewis in a project format in 22-23. That has come to an end, been taken in-house by the Vale of Glamorgan Council. And that is the end of the report to the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee. I'm happy to take questions from you, and will do my best to answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rachel. And I can see Councillor Norman, you have your hand up. So would you like to come in?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Rachel, for a very comprehensive report. Just reading through your list of partnerships that play a key role, and I understand that the Sports Lot Community Chest is one of the ones mentioned, and I understand that's been disbanded. Am I being given false information on that, or is it correct?
No, indeed, that is correct. We are still, however, in contact with Karen and the team, so that if any resources under the auspices of sport come into the Vale, then we and other councillors who were members of that board are ready and willing to participate. So it's kept there as in lieu, well, in waiting, if you like.
Right, thank you very much.
Councillor Ian Buckley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Rachel. Not so much a question, more of a point. It's heartwarming to see how many people that you're working with and the amount of events that have been held in all those places. And it's brilliant to see how many people that you said are volunteering now, and let's just, it's in part down to all the great work that you're doing, and let's just hope that it continues into the future. Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And Thank you, Rachel. Congratulations on the successful application to get the heating brought up to spec. It's really important, isn't it, that we provide, we do all that we can to provide appropriate facilities for the services that we're providing of the volunteers who give their time to us. So that's really good to hear, and also good to hear about how GVS is responding to the needs of its members through things like setting the fees aside and delivering training online to reach more people. So, you know, really good to hear about how that continues to be a responsive service reflective of members' needs. I'm going to follow up on Councillor Buckley's comment about volunteering. So I was interested to see in the report that inquiries regarding volunteering in the Vale 22-23 were 553, which was an increase on the previous year. The number of people who GVS then found an opportunity to volunteer was 263. So again, an increase on the previous year, but obviously quite a marked difference between the number of people who made an initial query about volunteering and then the subsequent placements that were taken up. And just interested to know whether there's any more information on why there's that gap. Is it that the volunteering opportunities weren't there in the community? Is it that people simply, you know, changed their mind following the initial expression of interest? So if there's any more information on that, Rachel, it would be great to understand more about that.
Yeah, happy to respond, Councillor. There are very many volunteering opportunities that are available throughout the Vale. I was astonished at the number that individual organisations were offering at our recent volunteering fair last Wednesday. What happens is that people come along and make an inquiry and say that they're interested in perhaps 2 or 3 or maybe more volunteering opportunities. The connections are then made by GVS to the organisations in question. It's then out of our hands as to how that organisation responds and how quickly they get back to a volunteer, and when the volunteer is spoken to, whether they then change their mind about whether they want to undertake that voluntary work. And also, I think we have to recognise that people's circumstances change as well. You know, what might have been something they'd like to do 1 week, perhaps a month later, they're no longer in the same position. Maybe they've been offered work. Maybe something's happened within the family. So there are lots of other outside influences that make that impact on how individuals take up the volunteering opportunities that have been flagged up for them, and all the information provided for them by the GVS volunteering team, which is 1.5 people. So it's a very small team dealing with a very large number of volunteers. I think what we need to recognise is that a lot of third sector organisations would like to involve volunteers and are desperate to involve volunteers, but their own resources of managing and supervising and supporting volunteers have greatly reduced over the last few years. And for them to expand a volunteer team does mean that they need to have more funding to enable them to do that. So something we all need to be cognizant of, all need to be aware that that is a factor. Volunteers are not free. They do cost an organisation resources of their staff, their paid staff time, and also to ensure that volunteers are properly trained, cost of that, and that any out-of-pocket expenses are paid by the organisation. And it is getting more and more challenging for organisations to be able to meet all of those needs. So a variety of issues, probably the main one being resources and the impact of outside influences on individuals.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I know from my own experience of setting the food bank up, 12 years ago, how critical it is to ensure that support is in place for the people who express an interest in giving their time as volunteers. I can see Councillor Norman wants to come back in, but just one other question on that, if I may. So across the sector, is there any kind of peer-to-peer mentoring scheme in place? Because I'm conscious that if you're starting from scratch, if you've got limited resources, if you're wanting to recruit and support volunteers, but you're struggling with capacity to do it, it can be tremendously useful if you can lean on another organisation that has that experience and has the capacity to offer advice and support within the sector, bearing in mind your point that within GVS itself, you also have limited resources. So is there any kind of mentoring or peer-to-peer support available across the sector in the Vale? Do we still have Rachel with us? Yes, I can see.
Yep.
Yes, here you are. Great.
Indeed, Chair. I don't think I pressed the button properly. There's resource within GVS to support. There's training advice, there's funding advice, and there is the network and forum for community development workers that covers the topic of volunteering and volunteer management. I guess all of those elements are important to anybody who is looking to recruit volunteers and who's already managing volunteers in straitened circumstances. We've just heard from Welsh Government that the Volunteering in Wales Fund that has provided a lot of resource to third sector organisations in their recruiting volunteers, etc., has been drastically cut. Or at least that's in the draft budget. And there is great concern that quite often those full cost recovery elements of contracts, so we were talking with Ian earlier, weren't we, about procurement and funding grants as well, that there can be quite a challenge for third sector organisations to receive the correct level of resource to make sure that those volunteers are receiving an enjoyable and effective experience. There's nothing worse than going to an organisation and being dropped into the deep end. That the right level of support, the right level of training, the right level of social interaction for volunteers is vitally important to anybody engaging in volunteering. I hope that's gone a little way to answering that question, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Absolutely appreciate and understand some of the pressures. Councillor Norman, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just a question for Rachel about the whether or not volunteers require DBS checks for different sectors that they go in contact with, and who funds that? And do you think that might be putting people off, if they're required to have a DBS, whether they be putting people off actually coming forward for volunteering?
Indeed, Councillor Norman, I think it does put some people off. It's usual that the cost is covered by the organisation that is recruiting the volunteer. It shouldn't be for the volunteer to be paying for a DBS check. It'll obviously depend on the type of activity that they're involved in. and you'll be aware that actually if you submit a DBS check and there is no direct linkage to safeguarding issues for children or adults, then that request will be denied. So it has to be for a volunteering role that is actually going to be in direct contact with vulnerable individuals, whether adults or children. So you'll understand that quite a lot of the organisations that Ian was talking about and that involve volunteers, they will have that additional cost of undertaking DBS checks for all volunteers who are involved in delivering their services. And that will be part and parcel of their contract with social services.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments from anyone? I don't see any more hands. So thank you, Rachel, for taking us through that report. And, as we've already said, look forward to seeing how the new forum develops and to hearing an update on that in terms of how we can strengthen what's clearly vital partnership between the local authority and the third sector, particularly in the current economic climate. So I move that we note the annual report from GVS. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Norman? Thank you very much, Councillor Norman. I saw your hand and assume that's why you were raising your hand. So thank you very much for that. We move on then. Oh, sorry. Sorry, apologies. I'm just making sure that I'm still connected. I am. Good. So we move on to agenda item 6, reshaping the next phase of transformation. This is a reference from Cabinet. And I understand, I'm not sure if it's Tom or it's Tom. Welcome, Tom. Please do take us through it.
Thank you very much indeed, Nosworth Committee. Good evening. My name is Tom Baring. I'm the Director of Corporate Resources. And as the Chair says, I'm going to just give you a brief overview of the reference from Cabinet this evening. It's being referred to your committee, Chair, along with a series of other committees and fora for some initial thoughts in terms of our next steps on our transformation journey. This report was considered by Cabinet on the 18th of January, alongside proposals for the Council's revenue budget for the next year. That's currently being consulted upon, so we'd encourage any of our third sector partners to contribute to that consultation on the budget and the savings. And we thought it was important to take the report on reshaping alongside the budget, because the medium-term funding position for this local authority, alongside all others in Wales, is incredibly challenging in the medium term. And what, as a leadership team, and I know as Cabinet has been being discussed, is a real need to concentrate now on how we can change and transform as an organisation over that medium term in order to mitigate the impact of funding reductions. The report itself goes back to 2014-15, when Reshaping Services, our transformation programme, was first introduced. And at that stage, the programme had 3 objectives: to identify different ways of delivering services, to meet the future financial challenges of the organisation and mitigate the impact of cuts, and also to develop the council and our partners to make sure that we were able to meet future challenges. And over the decade, we've saved about £59 million and achieved a lot through that transformation programme in terms of different models of delivering services, different relationships that we've got with other organisations, and lots of work in terms of how the organisation itself operates and the way that we engage with our colleagues. During the pandemic, and Rachel's talked about some of this evening, we learned an awful lot about how the local authority could work alongside the community and the third sector. in mitigating the impacts of the pandemic on residents in the Vale of Glamorgan. And back in 2021, we took a report to Cabinet setting out a renewed vision for reshaping, maintaining the objectives around developing the organisation, but also importantly, having more of an outward-facing perspective on the programme. So looking at how we could work alongside our communities in order to strengthen them. And over the last couple of years, that work has achieved a significant amount in terms of some of the food projects and warm spaces that Rachel has been speaking around, but also our work in terms of community-focused schools. So looking at how we can connect our council departments, other public sector organisations within schools to make sure we're providing support for families and our pupils in a place that best meets their needs. But with the challenging medium-term financial position, there is a need for the reshaping programme to once again have more of a financial imperative to it. So the framework that is set out within the report that your committee has got this evening, Chair, talks about 5 themes for reshaping, and they are incredibly wide-ranging. They're about every part of what the organisation does. And they have one sole purpose, I suppose, or connecting purpose, which is in order to be able to continue to provide the wide range of services that our residents expect and need from us at a time when funding is becoming increasingly challenging. And those themes start with a new target operating model for the organisation. And in effect, this is the sort of overarching theme that as a council we'll be working on. And that looks at fundamentally how do we operate as an organisation. So how do we use our technology? How do we structure our people? How do we take decisions? And how do we ensure that our processes are designed in order to meet the needs of our residents, and how can they interact with us? And taking those kind of principles, we would then apply them across the other 4 themes. So the first being service transformation, so looking at how do we change services in order that they can improve outcomes, but also be done at a reduced cost. And that might be looking at the experiences that we've had in terms of setting up Big Fresh Catering Company, the council's wholly owned local authority trading company operating school meal service, looking at models of internal reconfiguration where we've taken a more place-based approach to neighbourhood services, and others. And the report sets out some examples that are being given some early consideration. There's then a theme around strengthening our communities, and that really reflects a lot on what we've been thinking about in terms of our relationship with our community and how do we work as enablers and facilitators in some instances rather than directly providing those services. And that makes reference to the really important work that we do with our third sector partners, other community groups, and also town and community councils that we're very pleased that we've got such great coverage in the Vale of Glamorgan to deliver. There's then a theme around digital innovation. So how can we make sure that we're using digital technology where it's appropriate to do so to support service delivery, to support the way that we operate as an organisation, and importantly then how can our residents interact with us at a time and convenience that meets them. And then finally, in reflection of the significant funding that has come into the Vale of Glamorgan externally, there's a theme around economic resilience. So that's how do we level up, ensuring that we take a place-based approach and invest in our communities so that we can create more and better jobs. So the proposals we're bringing this evening, Chair, to give some early awareness to your committee alongside others, the next steps that we're going to be taking forward are the development of the Council's new corporate plan for 2025 to 2030. And reshaping is a really fundamental part of that, because that will be about how do we take those steps to become the organisation that our residents and our colleagues need us to be when we get to 2030. There'll be lots of opportunities for us to engage with yourselves throughout the process of developing this programme, and then importantly delivering it. And this links in quite neatly with the next item on your agenda this evening, Chair, around strengthening communities. My colleague Helen is going to give an update, but that's a really brief overview of the progress so far, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you for taking us through that so clearly and indeed succinctly. And you've outlined both the pressures and the priorities that the council is facing. And I was looking at particularly the section on service transformation. So I appreciate that the council's approach will be to transform the approach it takes in terms of engagement and working in relation to the third sector in particular, which is obviously what we're particularly interested in tonight. So if I look at things like alternative models of operation for community-based assets, and you might not be able to answer this yet, Tom, because I'm conscious there will be a consultation process and there's much discussion to happen going forward. But do you envisage that to be a proactive or a reactive process? So what I mean by that is, are we going to be in a sense passive and waiting for communities and third sector organisations to come forward with proposals, or do you envisage that the council will be proactive in terms of signalling some specifics around opportunities and areas where we're interested in having those discussions with communities and with third sector organisations?
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose my answer is it's probably a bit of both, in the sense that we will be identifying some proactive opportunities where we think that those opportunities exist to work in a different way. I think we've done lots of reflection and learning in terms of some of the initial discussions around community asset transfers as well. Some of that process was probably more involved for everybody in that process that it needed to be. And actually, over the last few years, certainly when I look at things like some of the single-use sports facilities, for example, that we've adopted different ways of working with community groups in the operation of those assets. I think there is significant potential to do that. So we will be looking at some specific areas and opportunities. And the reason for saying there's a bit of both is that we are always open to conversations and approaches from community groups and others in terms of the operation of assets. We know that some brilliant ideas come out of those groups, so we'd certainly welcome those. But one of the learnings from the very early days of reshaping is that we don't want to kind of stand off of waiting for people to come to us while other people wait for us to come to them. It's important that we reach out where we think there may be opportunities, and we do that with an open mind in terms of what that arrangement could look like.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important, to hear you say that, Tom, because I think my experience is that, there very often are individuals and community groups and organisations within the Vale who'll have a great idea about a particular service or indeed a facility within their local community, but don't necessarily know or understand that it's okay to approach the council and say, can we have a conversation about this? So, really helpful to understand that there'll be both that proactive and also that responsive approach to those opportunities as we move forward in terms of service transformation. I can see a couple more hands, so if I bring in Councillor Buckley next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom. And I'm not sure if you've answered my question in what you were saying about speaking to the communities with the single-use sports things. But I was going to ask on your economic resilience thing on point 2.14, where you say a place-based approach. Could you just expand a bit on that for me, please, mate?
Yeah, of course, Councillor. We've received some significant funding in terms of Transforming Towns funding, which is enabling us, as part of our work, to look at some place-based approaches within the 4 towns across the county. And some of the work that's being led by my colleagues in the Place Directorate is about looking at adopting what they describe as a place-based approach to planning how services could look and be delivered, and also how we invest in those areas, recognising that the 4 towns themselves have got different characteristics, different geography, different needs. So the idea is that that we will be having 4 place-based or town boards, which will develop those place programmes in order to direct that investment and that work. And also learning from some of the work that as a team we've been doing in partnership with Rachel, for example, in Llantwit Major, looking at what the need and equally what the assets are. And I mean assets in the sense of community groups and business working together, at what those needs are and how collectively we can meet them. And that's what's behind the More Than Food project that we're working in partnership with GVS to deliver, and indeed others, to deliver by looking very specifically at the needs and demand within a particular area.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Rachel, you wanted to come in on this.
Thank you, Chair. As an organisation that has gone through the very painful process of community asset transfer, I was pleased to hear that you'd be looking to simplify that process. I think the community asset transfer process for us to take on Ishted House and the old Western Vale Integrated Children's Centre took quite a few years, between 3 and 4 from initial idea through to actually taking the building on. So, and in essence, what we and others who've gone through community asset transfer have ended up with is a basic lease. So I think perhaps we could really look at how we simplify that process. So I welcome that, Tom. I wouldn't want anybody else to experience the pain that we did, and I know that our colleagues in the local authority did as well, trying to meet all of the different elements of community asset transfer. And I guess where we're talking about transformation of services, it's a big word, it's a dramatic word, and I guess I'm looking from the third sector perspective for some dramatic changes and some opening up of services that haven't previously been contracted out to third sector, but that could be contracted out to third sector and possibly should be contracted out to third sector. So waiting with bated breath to see how all of those elements fit together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Tom, I don't know whether you want to respond to any of those comments.
Thank you, Rachel, for the comments around welcoming the simplification of community asset transfer process. It's definitely something that we've learned from. We've changed some of the approach already with single-use sports facilities, and I think there's an opportunity for us to simplify further. In terms of the comments around some dramatic changes, I think having been through this budget setting process to the point that we're at now to have these proposals, this feels like the most challenging year ever. And I know everybody always says that, but it genuinely does feel so this year. And I think the reason behind the reshaping programme, the reason for it being so wide-ranging in terms of the subjects it's looking to cover is because we want to try and protect those services that matter most to the residents in the Vale, but the recognition is that the amount of funding that the council will receive in the medium term is going to be incredibly hard. And therefore, there is a real opportunity for us to think really differently. And some of the ideas that will come forward most definitely will involve working more closely with the third sector. And I made reference to some of the learning from COVID earlier. And I think that was a real turning point in the understanding that actually working alongside the community, whether that's through the third sector, whether it's community groups or indeed other types of organisation, can often achieve greater impact and better outcomes. So there is definitely a willingness to do that. Now it's about starting the piece of work in terms of identifying the specific opportunities, and there'll definitely be plenty of engagement and consultation with the sector and others as we go through.
Thank you, Tom. Were there any comments or questions for Tom from anyone else? No, I don't see any hands. So I think in terms of this is a reference from Cabinet, so we have an opportunity as a committee to feed back to Cabinet. And I think what I've summarised here is that the feedback we would give is that we very much welcome the approach to service transformation that's proposed within the paper, in particular, that there will be a proactive but also a responsive approach to engaging with communities and with the third sector. That we also welcome the intention to simplify the community asset transfer process. And that the third sector in particular very much welcomes the opportunity to work more closely with the council in relation to any new opportunities that might arise through the proposed service transformation approach. Is everybody happy that that would be the response that we feed back to Cabinet? Is there anything that I've missed or anything that you need to frame differently? I don't see any hands, so I will assume that everybody is happy with that. Thank you very much, Tom. Really appreciate you taking us through that. And then we move on to agenda item 7, which is a report on strengthening our communities and work to tackle poverty and the current cost of living crisis. And I believe, Helen, are you taking us through this? Yes. Hello, Helen.
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So this report is another reference to the committee. It's actually a reference from our Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, and it's also being considered by Community Liaison Committee and Governance and Audit. And then all the comments from the various committees will go to Cabinet, hopefully next month, for them to consider the report. The report itself brings together a number of different strands of work, and some of the elements of this will be very familiar to the committee as it builds on a report that Tom and I brought to the committee last summer when we were looking at the Audit Wales reports that are referenced in this report, and that proposal of looking at how we respond to those reports, but taking quite a wide-ranging and integrated approach to it all, and seeing that if we did a programme of engagement with a number of sectors, we could look to respond to a number of pieces of work that were ongoing, and hopefully then feed into sort of progression of some different activities. So building on the conversations that we had with this committee last summer, we've sort of moved that on with the report that you have before you now. And what we've actually proposed here is, as well as looking at those 4 Audit Wales reports that looked at poverty and also the third sector, but also brought in work with social enterprise and community resilience, as well as that more strategic approach to how we're looking at poverty, that we utilise that to sort of build on that to take forward the work that we need to do on the Town and Community Council Charter, the work on the Voluntary Sector Compact, but also the new corporate plan and the reshaping work that Tom's just been discussing with you. So as I say, this is quite a lengthy report with quite a lot of content. As I say, hopefully some of it's familiar. And also it builds on really, I think, quite a few of the issues that have been discussed through the previous agenda items tonight, even going back to, I think, what Ian was talking about in terms of the experience of social services with working with different sectors. So within the report that's been referenced here, so there is some detail provided on those 4 Audit Wales reports, and how that links into the Council's critical challenges within the annual delivery plan, and particularly the work on cost of living. So within this report, we also did take the opportunity to update on some of the work that the Council has been undertaking. And again, you'll see that there's reference to a range of activities across different parts of the Council. And in section 2 of the report is where we go into a bit more detail then, as I say, in terms of sort of bringing together the various issues. So we bring in some context there in terms of the sort of the situation within the Vale in terms of our economic report and some of the details within the Wales Index of Multiple Deprivation. And then we sort of move into picking up this proposal around integrating and coordinating those activities, as I've already referenced, in terms of those various different work streams. As I say, we do detail within the report the different recommendations across those 4 Audit Wales reports, and attached as the appendices to this report. You'll see the proposals about what the response will be on that, which proposes that taking a quite holistic range of activity in terms of how we respond to these reports, but also updating on some of the information in that first report from Audit Wales, where we talk about some of those key recommendations that they put forward with regards to that more strategic response to tackling poverty. So as you'll see from those reports, there is a focus on the better opportunities to work with social enterprise to increase community resilience. And as I say, we've also referenced the much earlier report that was undertaken, that was a Vale-specific report on how we work with the third sector. And very much we're seeing this about what our relationships look like, and trying to get a better understanding of what it's like from the council perspective, but also importantly from our town and community councils, social enterprise, and the third sector, in order to move this work forward. And then particularly, as Tom was talking about, how we look at that transformation agenda. So as I say, within the report, we highlight some of the activities that are within the Council's current annual delivery plans, that picks up on things like community-focused schools, as well as some of the work around the Shared Prosperity Fund. We also talk about the cost of living analysis update, which has recently been completed, as well as some of the work with our partners on the Public Services Board, and the links there to the work that's been identified there in terms of some of our most deprived communities. Within this report, as I say, we've taken the opportunity to update on a number of activities that the Council has been focusing on, again, very much in partnership with the third sector and with other colleagues. So we've highlighted some of the work around tackling food insecurity here. So you'll see how some of the funding has been utilised. And we've also referenced the Voluntary Major Food Project, which has also been discussed earlier and that we've discussed with this committee previously. And then some of the work that's happened around our warm spaces and tackling loneliness and isolation. And you'll see within the report that we've been keen where possible, where there are different smaller pots of funding from Welsh Government, to see that we can maximise that and make those connections across those different activities. In paragraph 2.29 of the report, we've highlighted the cost of living reserve that was established within the 23-24 budget. So detailed there is how some of the funding had been utilised at the time of this report. Since this report was originally written, there have been some further updates with that in terms of utilising the money to support the work of, for example, Citizens Advice, the Food Bank, and also £25,000 was made available for funding to support some smaller projects across the community, and organisations were invited to bid for funding up to £2,500. Letters are currently going out to those that applied for that funding, and that funding has been used for a range of activity across the Vale, so particularly food projects across different areas. Some of those are run through our schools, some through smaller organisations. Some of the warm spaces that have continued, so the funding from Welsh Government has not been made available this year, but we've used some of this funding to be able to continue with some of that work. And also where we found also some activities supporting children's well-being, and also some of the work as well around school uniform as well that was asked for our school. So we had quite a high number of applications for that funding, which was quite sobering, but as I say, we've managed to make that £25,000 go as far as we could to meet those acute needs. And at the same time, we've managed to signpost and connect to other funding opportunities as well from the information that was provided to us. So that's just an update on that. In terms then of sort of, I suppose, the progress that's been made on that idea of integrating the work since we first discussed this within the this committee, we have engaged Compass Wales to undertake the work on behalf of the local authority to really undertake that engagement with council officers and with external organisations as well. So Compass are currently probably about 3/4 of the way through meeting with different officers across all parts of the council to discuss their experiences and what opportunities and barriers they might think in terms of working with the third sector and social enterprise. They will shortly be starting to undertake some one-to-one interviews with some different third sector organisations and some social enterprises, as well as having some focus group work with town and community councils as well. And all of this is helping to build up that picture of that relationship and what we can do, both in terms of improving work to tackle poverty, but also feeding into that wider agenda around the transformation programme as well, and our ongoing work with different sectors. The work will then sort of form the basis for a number of workshops then over the next few months, and particularly today we met with Ian to talk about doing some of that around the Section 16 work and social services in particular, and again how we can try and make that more available to other sectors, so particularly the third sector, and then understand their experience a bit more in terms of what the ask is from social services. As I say, then all of that work will come together and hopefully provide sort of the foundations for the work that we need to do to review the Town and Community Council Charter, the work on the Voluntary Sector Compact that we've also already started discussions with GVS about, that this work will also feed into, and as a part of the work around reshaping and the council's new corporate plan for 25-2030 as well. So all of this work is very much the start of those conversations, and the work with Compass will help us then formulate what those further conversations will need to be. But as I say, it was an opportunity to bring the report back to this committee to highlight how work has been progressing since we discussed it in the summer, and how we're trying to bring in all those different aspects as well. So thanks, Chair. That's sort of the end of just sort of that bit of a whistle stop through a very detailed report. And then if there's any questions, Tom and I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Helen, for taking us through that. Are there any questions or comments from anyone for Helen, please? Rachel. So, Rachel, I can see that your hand is raised.
I'm chatting away to myself.
No, I've done it myself, Rachel. We're all getting used to the new system, so please don't worry.
Yes, yeah, so the button is pressed correctly again. Just really to say thank you, Chair, and explaining more about the strengthening communities element. I guess what we're looking for from the third sector again is to work very closely with our partners in the local authority to ensure that our communities and the individuals who live in those communities are not missing out, not suffering, and not experiencing, although they are experiencing considerable issues and challenges at the moment. And by working together and recognising each other's strengths, that we can make that big difference. And that's really what I was talking about with Tom, about let's not be scared of making some big transformational changes, to the way that we have delivered services previously. I think we have got a lot of assets in the third sector, not just physical assets in buildings, but we've got lots of third sector organisations and community groups that are so grounded within their community. They are the experts on what is needed locally, and are probably the ones that we would be relying on to actually deliver some of that, whether they're volunteers or whether they're managing projects. It really is important that when we look at these reports that have gone through the council process, that we do eventually, sooner rather than later, hopefully, see some big differences, some major changes in the way that we are supporting communities and groups. I think the worry for us in the third sector is that if there isn't that support, and at the moment the Welsh Government draft budget isn't looking that supportive, we are looking to our partners in local authority, and that's a massive challenge for you with everything that you're facing. But we help you to help make some of those savings and restructuring. And so it is important that we do strengthen our communities. It is important that we recognise just how much it's likely to cost to support and restructure services. And the £25,000, I think, has been greatly welcomed by small community groups across the Vale. But you're right, it's only hit a very small number. And there are others, as we see from the oversubscription to that resource, who will be struggling and trying to find a replacement resource to enable them to deliver the services that we want them to. So it was just really to underline what I'd said before, and to make sure that is written in blood almost throughout these documents as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel, for those comments. Helen, Tom, I don't know whether you want to make any response to that. I've got some questions and queries of my own. Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, I suppose it was just to say that, I think this work is very much about understanding more about sort of those different perspectives in terms of current working relationships, but also what the opportunities are and the challenges are coming forward. The work that Compass have already done to date has been really interesting, and in terms of their feedback about the range of activity that is happening. And I think it'll be really interesting for us now as they move into the conversations with people that aren't within the council to see how we bring all of that together. So I think this work is very much about trying to make that difference and move it forward. And we've been really keen to make sure we are aligning it to the transformation work as well. So we've not just thought, well, those are Audit Wales reports and we'll look at those in isolation, but actually trying to take a step back from it all and saying, actually, what does this mean for us as an organisation moving forward? As you say, what does it mean for the organisations we want to and need to work with as well? And how do we make that positive and future-proofed experience, I think, as well. So again, I think, we'll be continuing this kind of work as it evolves through all of these programmes. But thanks for that feedback, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. A comment on a question from me, if I may. So, in terms of the report, I mean, obviously you're referencing within it some of the drivers in terms of the cost of living crisis, but it did feel to me that we could probably do more to raise awareness and strengthen that area of reporting, because what we know is that in terms of drivers of poverty, many of those drivers sit outside the control of the council, and indeed they sit outside the control of Welsh Government. So some of this is about decisions that are made at a Westminster level, for example, in relation to decisions that are made around welfare benefits, social security, which sit outside the remit of either Welsh Government or the council. You'll be aware that Welsh Government has recently published a new child poverty strategy, and there's been a degree of disquiet from Children's Commissioner and others about some aspects of that, including things like the lack of clear targets or impact measurement. So we operate, don't we, as a council within that wider, broader context of what's driving poverty and what's driving cost of living. And as I say, I think it's referenced within here, but I also think it's important to strengthen that information so that all those who are working across the third sector and across the council are very clear as to the constraints the council is facing and also the limits, in a sense, of what we can achieve. We want to work together. It's important to strengthen those partnerships, as Rachel has already said, but we also have to be clear around the limits and the constraints of our remit and what we can do working together across the Vale. And I always think it's helpful to be as clear as possible about that so that we're being really realistic. And then my question is about last week, Welsh Government published a new Charter for Welsh Benefits. The Vale Council has signed up to that charter along with all local authorities in Wales, which was really great to see. And obviously that's brand new. That's a very new piece of work that's just come out. But there are some very clear ambitions within that charter in terms of how local authorities work to raise awareness of people's financial entitlement and to make it as easy as possible for them to access it. So as I say, I'm conscious it's early days, but interested to know how that falls within the remit of this work, and whether or not there's been any thinking, given that it's very early days, around how the impact of complying with that charter will actually be measured in terms of tackling poverty and cost of living crisis. And please don't worry if you don't have that information tonight, because as I say, I'm conscious it's very new.
Thank you. Do you want me to answer that one, Helen? Oh, yeah. Absolutely, and we're giving some early thought, Chair, to the way that we can make sure that we are consistent with the commitments that are set out in the new benefits charter. And as an authority, we're supportive of it because it builds on some of the work that we've been ramping up over the last couple of years in terms of ensuring that people are aware of their entitlements and the benefits that people can access. We've done lots of work building on the really great stuff that the GVS did during the pandemic in terms of how we get that information out to people, whether that's through the council's website and making sure that that's done in a way that feels accessible to people, but also in some non-digital methods as well. So working with the Vale 50 Plus Forum, for example, to do a promotional campaign around older people's entitlements. So there's some work for us to build on. And you're absolutely right. The importance now is linking some of that work into understanding the impact that we're having in terms of helping people with the cost of living, and also that poverty piece more fundamentally as well. And some of the early thinking that Helen and I have been having around the point you were making in terms of what we can and can't control or affect, I think that will start to play into the Public Services Board work around tackling deprivation in those three areas within Barry that are amongst the most deprived in Wales, and where collectively we need to take action as the public and third sector. And you know, I'm grateful to Rachel for GVS's input into that programme of work already. And it is going to be looking at some of those very long-term population level indication of poverty, but really importantly, trying to identify some things that we can measure quickly to understand if we're having the impact that we desire to make. And this, I suppose, highlights the importance of that reshaping approach, looking at both our individual services, but also things like that economic resilience piece, making sure that regeneration investment goes into areas to create those jobs, to help support people, because we know that if we can support people into good employment with good housing, that helps then in terms of access to healthcare, good food, all of those kind of things as well, which is so important for lifting people out of poverty. But it's there is a limit, as you say, to what the council can do. But hopefully, by taking this integrated approach, that will maximise that effort.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Any comments or questions for Tom or Helen from anyone else? I see no hands. So just to say thank you both for taking us through that. In terms of response to Cabinet, some of the comments that I've noted from committee, the importance of continuing to work together and the value of recognising the role of experts in the field, that committee welcomes the opportunity committee welcomes the commitment to strengthening that engagement, and also wants to ask that Cabinet recognise the cost in terms of strengthening communities. Also, something around doing more to raise awareness of the drivers of poverty and recognising where the council can have an impact working with communities and with the third sector. Is there anything that I've missed or anything that anybody would like to add to that? No. Okay, so thank you both. We move on to our final agenda item this evening, which is agenda item 8, Project Zero Update Report. And I think, Tom, you're taking us through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And thank you to the committee for taking an interest in Project Zero at previous meetings. And we thought that as we'd had some discussion at, I think, the meeting in the summer about making sure that we bring some updates to the committee about the critical challenges which are contained in the Council's annual delivery plan, we thought it'd be useful to, alongside the transformation programme, also show some of the progress that we've been making in terms of Project Zero. And just by way of very quick recap, Project Zero is the Council's programme of activity that responds to the climate and nature emergency declarations that the Council has made over the last few years. And the Project Zero programme of activity is centred around a challenge plan which has got 18 critical challenges within it, and 80 steps that we need to take to do two things. One, decarbonise the council by 2030, that's the Welsh Government target for the public sector, and then contribute to a net zero carbon Vale of Glamorgan by 2050, again, the Welsh Government target there. In Appendix A, Chair, to the report this evening, you can find a really detailed report. This has been developed on the back of feedback and requests from the 2 council scrutiny committees that we report to every 6 months to provide an update against each of those 80 steps. And you can see the work that has been planned, underway, and is going to be undertaken in the next 6 months, set out within the challenge plan itself. The first 4 challenges within the challenge plan are outward facing. They're about the organisation developing and delivering strong leadership on this agenda. And we've talked quite a lot about some of these activities this evening. Was really pleased that we were able to run a climate event with the 50+ forum, hearing the views of older residents in terms of their concerns, but also their ideas for helping reduce emissions. The Council's volunteering policy that has been launched in the last 12 months as well shows our organisational commitment to volunteering. Rachel mentioned as well the really exciting work underway at CF61. That's one of 4 community centres or community venues that we've been able to attract that Ystadau Cymru investment into different approaches to decarbonise, which are also good for the environment, but also good in times of a cost of living crisis. And we've also talked about the Food Veil project, looking at how we can make sure that there's good quality, affordable local produce available for people, as well as the important role that volunteers through the various friends groups have to play across the Vale of Glamorgan in working in partnership with the local authority in terms of maintaining some of our open spaces, for example. There are lots and lots of those groups that are working across the Vale that add real value and give people an opportunity to contribute to their local environment. The next steps within the challenge plan look at our responsibility to future generations, and then finally the things that the council is doing to take action to cut our emissions now. And there's information in the report this evening for members and colleagues from the third sector to see in terms of our carbon emissions as an organisation, and it's pleasing to see that our emissions overall are down year on year, but there's a significant amount for us to do in terms of the carbon within our supply chain, and that's one of the major areas of focus that we'll be giving in the next 6 months in terms of how we can look to decarbonise. That's a really, really quick overview of what is a massive programme of work that will feature as an important driver in both the reshaping programme and our corporate plan as we head into the 2025 to 2030 plan. But we thought it was important to give it some prominence and bring it to committee this evening in case there were any comments, feedback, or indeed opportunities that anybody would like us to explore. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Tom, for taking us through that. Are there any questions or comments from anyone? So I've had the opportunity of considering this under a number of committees, and probably just worth raising here again some of the feedback I've heard from colleagues and others while the report is being discussed, which is because this is such a broad programme, that the introduction of the RAG rating is really helpful because it provides more detail in terms of activity and progress around some of the targets and ambitions that the council has. But it can be difficult to understand the direct impacts between some of that activity and what we're seeking to achieve in terms of net zero. So one of the comments I've heard from previous committees is that it would be useful perhaps if future reporting could include a case study so that we could see the broader picture in terms of what the activity is actually achieving in terms of this particular aspects of the council's activity. So that might be something that, it's just worth emphasising in terms of bringing it back to committee in the future. And it would, from this committee's point of view, I think it would be particularly welcome if that case study could focus on the partnership approach that we're taking with colleagues in the third sector, because as the report makes clear, this is not an ambition or a target that, and I think Rachel made reference to this earlier on, talking about the grant funding that's been achieved for CF61. This is not something that we can achieve in isolation. We're very much working with and dependent upon our partnerships with the third sector.
Absolutely, and there's the difficulty in terms of that case study approach, I think, will actually be in selecting the one to actually case study, because there's a huge amount in terms of the third sector involvement in that partnership angle. But we can certainly look to do that. And I think the point that you made, Councillor, in terms of seeing that direct impact in measurable emissions terms is really important. And that underlines for me the importance of us bringing forward the carbon management plan as soon as we can do. And I'm looking forward to being able to bring that to a variety of committees in the spring, and that will have some measurable targets in terms of our direct emissions. But certainly we're continuing to learn on this one in terms of how we go about measuring and reporting. So thank you for the feedback, and look forward to the opportunity of being able to show the next iteration of the report in the next few months.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And if I may, I'm not sure if this is normally allowed, but Rachel, just what's your sense about how aware your colleagues and the third sector is in terms of the Vale's ambitions and targets in relation to this aspect of our work? Is there more that you feel we could be doing to communicate this? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, Rachel, which is very unfair, but I'm just really interested to understand, what the sector's perspective is on this.
I think it's something that is pretty high up on the agenda for third sector organisations, particularly thinking about revenue funding and reducing that by reducing utility bills, etc., and trying to make any buildings or facilities that they have as cost effective to run as is possible. I think we could do a lot more. I mean, GVS would be very happy to share with our membership and the wider sector, perhaps not the full in detail report, because I think we might lose folk on some of that. But I'm sure that the press department in the local authority can come up with something that covers all aspects of that report and the action plan that we would be very happy to share with our. There's a lot of knowledge within the third sector, and perhaps we need to better tap into that. And that would be a challenge for us that we'd certainly be happy to look undertaking if that was something that our partners wanted us to do. I noticed actually within the action plan that there was, you were talking about the traffic lights, there was a red for reusing rainwater. I would have thought that was quite an easy target to put into action. Lots of it already goes on. I would imagine most active gardeners and allotment holders are keen to do that anyway. But I guess it's from the larger buildings, isn't it, within the Vale that we'd be looking to make an impact. So yes, Chair, it is something we'd be happy to share, and it's something that we're happy to be involved in. Certainly, as a member of the Public Service Board, we're all committed to the Charter and ensuring that we meet those targets by 2030. That's one hell of a challenge when you think it's 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Rachel. We'll definitely be in touch in terms of some of that maybe bite-sized information that we can share both ourselves in terms of things like social media and some of the press pieces that we put out. And always grateful for GVS colleagues helping to spread that message to your members. So thank you.
Evening. Oh, Helen has got her hand up. Helen, please come in.
Thanks. It was just to add to that, Rachel mentioned in terms of the work of the Public Services Board on this, and Rachel joined Public Service Board partners recently in a workshop to discuss some of the work that the PSB might be doing around the climate change. And I think one of the things that was flagged up is how the larger organisations might be able to support a little bit more some of the other organisations and other sectors in terms of some of this work and making sure there's that bit more across fertilisation. So again, I think it's something we can certainly pick up both in terms of the council's activities and the PSB activities as well.
Thank you for that, Helen. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Rachel, for accepting that question. I'm very grateful to you. So thank you, everybody. We come to the end of tonight's agenda. So thank you for your time. And I believe we're due to meet again on the 15th of April. And I look forward to seeing you all again then. So thank you very much and good night.